This presentation is delivered by the Stanford Center for Professional Development.
Welcome to this week's seminar on People, Computers, and Design. I'm Michael Bernstein, faculty here in Computer Science and Human-Computer Interaction. This week we are really excited to host Panos Ispeirotis, who's a faculty member in the Stern School of Business over at NYU. And I think if there's a single person who has really helped catalyze crowdsourcing as an academic field and effort, it would be this individual who really early on, actually through a blog presence, originally called Behind Enemy Lines, then got backed off to a computer scientist in a business school, was really talking publicly and early about what it means to have crowdsourced labor, how to do it accurately, and how to do it well. And I think that a lot of what we have today as an academic endeavor trying to understand how people connect and contribute online has been catalyzed by Panos. So at this point, I'll hand it over to him.
Thanks, Michael, for giving me credit that I don't deserve, but it's a pleasure to be here. So what I'm going to talk today is some of the experiences that I have in building systems that are using crowdsourcing and with using humans that are imperfect and they make mistakes and so on in order to build something good automated machine learning system. So the broad goal of what I'm trying to do is try to find ways to integrate human intelligence that you can access over the internet today with machines and try to create a hybrid system that operates better than either of the two could. So I will focus most of the description of the talk today around a concrete task that has to do with online advertising and online advertising application, but most of the lessons can be easily generalized to a variety of different settings. So what this plot is showing is two things. One is how much time people spend across different mediums, across TV, reading newspapers, listening to the radio, browsing the internet, and so on. This is the black bar. And the red bar is what fraction of the marketing budget gets allocated across these different mediums. So you can see, for example, that 37% of the time people watch TV and 32% of the marketing budget gets allocated there. However, if you look at the internet, you will see that people spend a lot of time today browsing the internet, but marketing budgets haven't shifted into the internet yet. The opposite happens for newspapers.
And so that means just print newspapers?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you look at that and see, why does this thing happen? And the basic explanation is the following. Marketing has this big division. So you are familiar with internet advertising, the ads that you see on Google. You search, you see an ad, you click, and so on. This type of ads, they were traditionally associated with people in marketing firms that were doing direct marketing. Telemarketers, people that were sending mail at home, and so on. These people were evaluated based on the responses that they were getting. So conceptually, it was very easy to transition on the internet, measure performance per click, per acquisition, and so on. However, if you are a marketer, the prestigious job there is not to do direct marketing. These are the guys that are in the basement of the marketing firms. The prestigious job is to do brand advertising. What's brand advertising? Well, Coca-Cola doesn't care when they show you an ad, whether you are click there and you are going to go to the site or whether you are going to buy Coca-Cola online. Delta doesn't care if you are going to click on the ad directly to buy an airline ticket. What they want is you to see the brand often and remember about it. And these guys are very afraid of improper ad placement. Placing the ad in a place that is not appropriate for the brand. So here's an example of this inappropriate brand. So here is New York Times discussing the shootings of Congresswoman Gabrielle Gibbons last January. The article talks about the shootings, about the events, and so on. And the ad network, analyzing the content of the article, delivers this ad here. The relevance algorithm that examined what's the relevance of this ad with the content did a tremendously good job. And the placement is completely inappropriate as well. Other brands have... I guess both the publisher doesn't want that, and sometimes even the brand. So other brands have similar issues. For example, Aflac here. I really like this one. So a few years back, people came and said, well, what we want to do is we want to build classifiers that detect different types of content that different brands don't want to be associated with. And I look at that and say, okay, so you want to build a web classifier, big deal. That was what people were doing back in 1995. But then I realized that the task was not as easy. So the demand to build the model had a very quick turnaround time. So for example, they had the pharmaceutical firm comes and says, we have the following problem. We market a drug that apparently many doctors are using in an off-label manner to treat swine flu. Off-label means that it hasn't been approved by the FDA for this purpose, but doctors are prescribing in any case. Of course, the pharmaceutical firm didn't mind prescribing an extremely expensive drug to patients. The FDA realizes that and say, you know what? We understand what you are doing, that you are implicitly approving this practice. So what you should do is you should shut down any ad that appears in content that disguises swine flu. So the pharmaceutical firm had two options. A, shut down completely their advertising campaign, many $1 million per week, or try to figure out which pages contain swine flu discussion and not appear against this content. Other firms have similar concerns. Big fast food chain didn't want to appear next to any page that discusses cholesterol, obesity, and all the nice things that you get from fast food. Airline company didn't want to appear next to discussions of terrorist plots, accidents, and so on. And for that, we have typically just a few days to build the model. Now, traditionally, if you want to build such a machine learning model, you spend a lot of time studying the domain, collecting data, training your models, and so on. Today, in this setting, we don't have this opportunity. We have just a few days. However, what we can do today is we can say, well, in order to collect the data to build our model, instead of having local people, we can go online, hire people through Mechanical Turk, through Odesk, and through other such online labor firms, get them to do the work, and have a very quick turnaround. There are two problems. One is that quality might not be good, but on the other hand, the cost benefits allow us to do better work there. So just for those of you that might not have heard about Amazon Mechanical Turk, Amazon Mechanical Turk is a marketplace where people post microtasks and they pay micropayments for the completion of these tasks. So for example, here we have Chris Callison-Birch, who is asking people to identify Arabic dialect in the text. He has 14,000 such documents, and he's paying 5 cents per document. So here's how the task looks like. So people see the text here, they're in Arabic. And people that know Arabic, they know typically the dialect from which this text is coming. So for example, the main dialects are the Moroccan and Algerian dialect, Egyptian, Saudi Arabia, the Lebanon and Syria, and the Iraqi. If you know Arabic, this is a very quick task. So you look at the sentence and you say, this is Arabic, this is Saudi, this is Lebanese, and so on. And you get paid 5 cents. So for our purposes, we said we're going to do the same, to collect data about the types of offensive content that appear on a web page. So here's a very simple example. Most advertisers don't want to appear in next to adult content, where adult content can be as extreme as hardcore porn or any discussion about celebrities and what they are doing in their private life and so on. So what we want to do was to have 4 categories for adult content. General audience, nothing offensive. PG-13, it is content that children below 13 should not be exposed to. R means that you should be an adult to be exposed to, and X is hardcore porn. When we hired local people to do the task, people could do approximately 200 websites per hour, approximately 20 seconds per website, and they were getting paid $15 per hour. Then we posted on Mechanical Turk, and since many people could operate on the task at the same time and label each web page, we were on up to 2,500 websites per hour, and actually our aggregate cost was even lower. So we look at that and say, well, that's really good. 10 times up productivity, lower cost, we're golden. Until we actually start to looking at what we are actually getting. So we put, for example, this guy with ID ATAMR 044, blah, blah. He looks at the website, all vintage porn, classification, general audience. Hot XXX Asia, classification, general audience. So effectively, we have a guy that doesn't even pay attention to the URLs that he's classifying, just presses G, 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 and he hopes that once he's done, we're going to pay him. And here's the problem. Yes, we could check what people are sending back and kick out the bad guys. The problem is that for this type of tasks, it doesn't make sense to verify the work. If I'm going to look at each web page and decide whether the person gave the correct answer, I might as well do the work myself. So it's costly to verify. Second, since I'm hiring people online, I have no idea how good they are. They might be trying to scam us, they might be good, but I neither know what are the correct answers for whatever I'm trying to do, neither I know how good are the people. So, and I want to figure out what are the correct answers, and potentially I want to know how good are the people. So we'll say, how can we solve that? So the first idea is the redundancy can be our friend. So instead of asking one person to do the task, we can ask multiple people. So for example, here is our guy, the spammer, in a redundancy setting. So for example, we have the site 25u.com. 10 people label it. Everyone says G, general audience. That's a good indication that this is general audience. If we look now at the 30 plus, 40 plus, everyone else says this is a porn site. Our guy here sticks out, says general audience. That gives us an indication that something is wrong with that answer. And if you take this idea and you try to generalize it, it gives birth to an algorithm that we initially thought that it was novel. Then we realized that this algorithm has been invented back in 1979 for the setting where they had doctors, new doctors, resident doctors, that were trying to figure out how good they are in diagnosing patients. Of course, you cannot have a senior doctor doing the diagnosis and then the residents are following in form of a test. That was very costly. And so therefore, they had resident doctors diagnose patients, and based on that, without, of course, knowing the diagnosis for the patient, and then they were trying to figure out how good are the doctors and what is the correct diagnosis for the patient. And here's how the algorithm works. You say, okay, let's get the assessments of what people said. Then let's say that the majority vote is correct. Then once we have the correct answer, let's say the majority, we say, let's now see how often each of the workers agrees with the majority. And based on that, we estimate what we call the confusion matrix. So for example, how often does the guy look at something for which the majority says G and classifies as G? For our spammer here, it was 99% of the time. That was good. However, our spammer, whenever he was looking at something where the majority was saying porn, also 99% of the time, he was saying that's G. So effectively, the guy was just saying G all the time. And then you can continue this algorithm iteratively. You can re-estimate next what's the correct answer. But now, instead of considering each person to be equal, you say, I'm going to weight down the answers that come from bad guys like this. And I'm going to rank higher the answers that come from high quality guys. And you do, again, kind of a weighted majority voting. And this thing converges. And you get back this type of estimates for the workers. Now, we look at that and said, OK, we're done. We know how good are the guys, because we can see how often they are incorrect, right? Everything outside the diagonal is incorrect. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Here's the problem. The spammer, he was lazy, but he was not stupid. He said, in order to get paid, I need to minimize the errors that I'm doing. But on the other hand, I don't want to be an obviously bad guy. What he realized is that in the majority of the things that he had to do, there was no adult content. Therefore, he looks at that and says, if I say always G, I'm going just occasionally to have an error. Since 9 or 8 out of 10 of the URLs don't have anything, I can just say everything is good, and I will have an occasional error. Indeed, actually, his error rate was 15% because he was classifying everything into general audience, and most of the sites are indeed general audience. The other guy that also makes mistakes, but in both directions, right? He looks at the porn website and can misclassify it as good, but also, the other way, has much higher error rate. So we can see that our spammer, despite the fact that he does no work, actually has lower error rate than a guy that pays attention, but he's erroneous. We looked at that, say, okay, let's not worry about this part. Doesn't seem that important. We'll get back to that. We'll find the worst guys first with the highest error rate. We'll kick them out, and then we'll get back to these guys. Then we rank the guys to see who are the worst offenders. The worst offender was the CEO of the company that was doing this task, followed by all the internal employees. Look at that, say, okay, we have a bug, let's fix it. Unfortunately, there was no bug. Here is how the CEO of the company was labeling things. So, 2 characteristics. She was a woman with a young family, had a few young kids at home. B, she is the CEO of a company that tries to detect offensive content on the internet, right? So there is an obvious bias to detect offensive content where there is none. So here's how she was labeling things. Whenever she was looking at something that was general audience, only 20% of the time she was saying this is general audience. 80% of the time she was saying, oh, this is PG-13. My kids should not be exposed to this content. This is not content for kids. Whenever she was looking at content that was actually PG-13, she was saying this is R, this is adult only. And whenever she was looking at R content, she was also classifying fine, and same thing for porn. And of course, this was generating tremendously high error rates. She had a 73% error rate. She was 73% of the time she was disagreeing with the commonly accepted answers. However, if you look at her mistakes, they are actually extremely predictable. So for example, when she says G, we know it's G. Whenever she says PG-13, it's never PG-13. It's always G. So yes, she's mistaken, but we can always fix that. When she says R, we have a little bit of ambiguity, but when she says porn, we know that she's good. If we compare that to the spammer, we have a big difference here. Whenever the spammer says G, we have no idea what this thing is. It can be anything. It can be G, it can be PG-13. So there is no real information that we get from the spammer. So for that, we said, okay, we're going to do the following. First, we're going to fix all the errors and the biases that we can, and then see what is the leftover error. So for example, for the spammer, when he says G, our best guess for the answer is something like it can be 25% G, 25% PG-13, 25% R, and so on. So since we have to pick one of these categories, we have a 75% expected error. For the good worker, who says PG-13, well, we know that it's always G. There is no ambiguity here. So we know it is G, so the expected error rate there is actually 0. Now, based on that, we could create a quality score that now consolidates this type of answers into a metric that we call quality, which is equal to 1 minus the expected cost of the worker divided by the cost of the spammer. If your decisions generate the same cost as a spammer, your quality is 0. If your cost of your decisions is 0, your quality is 100%. Now, this metric has two good characteristics. A, it removes any bias. So we fix the bias and then we evaluate you. And second, it's a scalar metric, which means that we can rank people. For a matrix, you cannot do that. Yes?
It seems like this slide and the previous one, you just switched. You define spammer in a way that's contradictory to the first way you introduced it, which is someone who picked the same category regardless. And so you have very different entropy on those two things. And so curious why the switch here.
What do you mean, what the switch?
Because in your first case, the spammer clicked G for everything. And now you're saying a spammer is one who assigns labels randomly. So you went from low to high entropy.
Oh, no. But randomly, actually, I would say the randomly is the wrong word.
Okay.
Without giving us any information. So even if you do randomly, or if you always press G or always press X, your cost is always going to be the same, because your confusion matrix effectively will say, I cannot separate. Whenever you say something, G or PG-13 or R or anything, I cannot infer anything meaningful about your answers. All your answers are going to degenerate into this. So if you give completely random answers, again, the corrected answer will be this 25% for everything. Effectively, yes.
So, for example, if I gave Jeff restaurant advice and I always undersold it, he would know exactly what to infer, even though it isn't what I said.
Correct. Actually, you can think about that in a conference review setting. If someone says strong reject for everything, and his weak reject is equivalent to an accept of someone else, you have a very systematic bias that you can figure out. If someone says accept for only the best paper and everything else gets weak accept, then the weak accept is not a weak accept, right? It is equivalent to the strong reject of the other person.
Yeah. This is a separate issue, bias and then the randomness are separate.
They are connected, actually, so that even in machine learning, they say that you don't have a board, right? So you can, for example, if you throw darts, right? You can be extremely accurate, but you can be completely off-center. In that case, you are good. You just need to calibrate your throwing. Yeah, in that case, you will be like this good worker, right? Low entropy, but biased. So you are completely off, but if you fix your answers, or if I move the target, right, you're perfect. In that case, we are moving the target ourselves. We don't let them know about anything. But if you are throwing all over the place, I cannot do anything with that. There was one question here. Yes.
So, to find the quality of a person, of a worker, you really need to know what the true answers are. And your true answers are dependent on consensus. So if you have more spammers than you have...
You are out of luck. Actually, if you have all spammers
Yeah.
and they are not connected, they will filter out themselves because they will never agree with each other.
But you won't have the answer anyway.
No. If I have a tremendous amount of noise, but it is not correlated with each other, the good guys will get out and will give me a signal about the correct answer. If I have 8 spammers and 2 good guys, and the 8 spammers are not coordinated or correlated with each other, they will not have any effect on the consensus vote.
If you have 8 spammers, all of them click on the leftmost thing.
In that case, if they are coordinated, you're out of luck. They will dominate the system.
Well,
Correct.
but if your non-spammers are biased, then you still don't know the true answers.
Sorry, if you are?
If your non-spammers are biased, then you still don't know the true answers.
If you have systematic bias in the crowd, then you are going to get a biased consensus.
Yeah,
In that case, if you introduce a few control points as goal tests,
I see. Okay.
then you can find out the bias of the crowd and fix it. Actually, we had this thing, for example, when this thing was running in India, where there was, as people call it, they were PG friendly. They were always pushing things as PG and above because they felt that this was their duty to classify things as PG. So, yes.
In the example here, it's like you switch to a uniform prior for what those possible labels could be.
Yeah.
But does the test get less powerful if really all of them are mostly G, but then there's only a few?
It is the same thing. I just, for simplification, I switched to a uniform prior.
But does this test get less powerful? Like, do you need more data to infer anything?
Yes,
about
yes.
it?
Any more questions?
I mean, in general, this is all pointing to a problem that we can't distinguish legitimate agreements from illicit coordination, right? This is why 4chan can elect, their
Yes.
leader as the Times Person of the Year.
I'm trying to get some theoreticians interested in the problem. There is a study of this problem in the theory of distributed systems about Byzantine algorithms and how they can take over the network and so on. So I'm trying to figure out in this setting, what are the bounds that we have first of how many spammers coordinated can take over the network, and B, how we can secure against that. So I don't have an answer, but I think it's a promising.
I kind of wonder, because you can introduce some amount of a small set of gold standard, if actually, it's not anywhere nearly as pessimistic as in a asynchronous distributed system.
Empirically, yes. I would like to have some proofs. Let's say that we'll say, okay, if you add 10% goal tests, the probability that spammers can take over your network drops to that percent. But I don't have such things at this point. So the next thing that we want to see, okay, we know how good are the people. What can we do with that score? So we wanted to, initially we had a very naive approach where we have this thresholding. So we're saying if you're above 60% quality, you get paid. If you drop below that, we reject you or we give you a warning and so on. Unfortunately, this strategy has a couple of negative properties. A, the very good guys, they didn't feel the pressure to give the best work. They were saying, okay, you know what? The threshold is 60%, I'm at 90%. I can go faster and get more work done as opposed to giving higher quality. Second, when you have a hard decision threshold, the guys that are just below that, they feel very bad just because their friend who got 51% gets the job and they got 49%, they get rejected, which is bad. So for that, we introduced this idea of quality-sensitive payment that operates as follows. So we said, let's set a price that is acceptable quality, 90%. For 90%, you get full payment. Then we said, what about the guy that is 80%? How much should we pay this guy? Should we pay them 80 divided by 90? Or what? And for that, we said, okay, we're going to have equivalency. So how many workers do I need of, let's say, 80% quality to reach the 90% threshold? I need 3 guys like that. Therefore, the guy with 80% quality gets 1/3 of the payment of the guy with 90% quality. The guy that has 70% quality, because I need 9 guys like that, gets 11 cents. And this thing has a nice property. A, you don't have a hard decision threshold, but the payment drops quite quickly as your quality drops. Therefore, people have the incentive to do their best, or at least to calibrate their answers, to give you the best time-adjusted quality that they can. And actually, it works reasonably well to encourage people to hit high levels of quality. One of the problems that we ran with that was that our own estimates of their quality was bad. Not bad, but uncertain. It was moving, especially people that did 10 things for us who were not quite certain about their quality. It was something like 90% plus minus 5%. You might hit the 85% estimate and so on, and we underpay you. So for that, we introduced the concept of a refund. So we get people that they start working for us, and we start estimating their quality over time. Assuming that their quality remains certain, we start, for example, we say, okay, you did 10 examples for us, your current estimated quality is 70%. You get paid as a worker that is 70% accurate. Then after you have done a few more, we say, you're not a 70% worker, you are an 80% worker. I start getting a better understanding of your quality. So therefore, not only you are going to get paid for these tasks as an 80% worker, I'm going to give a refund for your prior work that captures the fact that I was the bad guy that didn't estimate properly your question, and you get a refund. Then as time goes by, I estimate your quality better and better, and I start refunding effectively whatever I didn't pay you because I underestimated your quality. So you can see in that case, actually, that scheme has a very nice property. As time goes by, people, because they get the refunds from earlier, they have the incentive to go on for as much they can. Because they say, if I work a little bit more, I'm going to get paid for the missing payment that they owe me for the last 5 rounds. And if I improve my quality in the next round, I'm going to get the missing payment for whatever I haven't been paid in the past. So eventually, until they reach their true level of, our estimate reaches the true level of quality, people keep getting refunds for their prior work, and they keep working for us. Actually, in some experiments that we ran, we could see that by paying people like that, they stick around for longer because they expect, they see actually their bonus. We don't tell them that this is a refund. We say that this is a bonus for maintaining performance. And people stick around for the task because they see the bonuses that keep coming over time. So if you want, I will not spend too much time for that, but if you have questions, ask me afterwards. Now, so far, I described a setting where I used the human intelligence of humans very passively. I say, here's a page, label it. Here's a page, label it. But we said, okay, this is very unsatisfying. We treat people as very naive machines. So instead of asking now people to passively label pages that we give them, we said, can we do the following? We are going to, instead of giving them pages and asking them to classify, we're going to ask them to find these pages for us. So for example, we wanted to build a model that detects hate speech on the web. If you randomly sample the web and ask people to label the pages, you're going to waste a lot of time asking people to label pages without hate speech. Fortunately, there is not that much hate speech on the web. And however, if you go and ask people to find content, they're actually very good at that. And here's one very nice advantage of this distributed crowd. If I ask every single one of you to think about hate speech and send me back 5 pages that contain hate speech, every person has a very strong bias and limited thinking about what exactly is hate speech. Actually, we tried it ourselves and we couldn't find more than 100 examples each. We kept running into our own cognitive limits. However, on the web, you put it out and people have completely different experiences, and therefore they send you back completely different data. For example, we had this guy that was saying, male chauvinist blogspot.com, right? So the guy kept going on about women, how bad they are, and so on. So you had people that are, mainstream racists, white pride, neo-Nazi guys, anti-Semitism guys. You run into other things like black people racist against white, and all sorts of hate speech that you can only grasp if you have access to a wide diversity of thinking. And actually, that was a pretty good case study for the crowd, yes.
Whenever I try to do this thing, everyone just responds with the top 5 results on Google when they search for hate speech.
Yes, actually we don't allow duplicate things that people have already submitted, and we even limit on the domain, no more 3 URLs per domain.
So maybe that's the trick.
But, well, you need to fix the Google bias first, right? But even beyond that, once you prevent them from using the obvious Google query, afterwards they start thinking of their own search strategies for Google to find hate speech, right? And it starts working pretty well. Yes?
Do you have information about what they tried but you didn't allow because it would be a duplicate? I guess that would be one way.
I do, but I don't have any statistics for that. This hits a lot, is what Michael mentions. When you are looking, for example, find me wine stores in Palo Alto. People go and they type wine store Palo Alto, and you're going to get 100 people issuing the same 10 wine stores that Google returns. So, but let me go one step further, actually. So, okay. Now, but even with this strategy in mind, we started running into limits. After getting 1,000 URLs back, people keep submitting things that we already know how to handle. Yet another racism page, yet another racist jokes, and so on. This gives birth to what we call blissful ignorance. Our model has, let's say, thousands of pages that contain hate speech. And then you're trying to evaluate your model. The classifier has this implicit assumption that the world is closed. It's all represented in the training data. So you split your training data, you do cross-validation and all these techniques that people use to evaluate cross-machine learning models. Everything seems great. Until the open world hits, and to quote Rumsfeld, we have these unknown unknowns. What's an unknown unknown? It is the case where the classifier fails to discover the content and fails with confidence. I'm absolutely confident that there is no hate speech in this page, while it's one of the most horrible pages that you can find on the internet. So, for example, we had this blog that I hate Richards and autistic children. We didn't have anything like that in the training data. We couldn't believe it. I mean, nobody thought about that. The classifier looks at that and says, oh, none of the terms that is associated with hate speech is in here. It seems perfectly legitimate. And actually, I see it's about children, this page. Therefore, get this ad about the child day preschools. Right? This is what the fail campaigns are being made of on the internet. And once this thing happens, trying to explain things that the classifiers are statistical creatures and they fail from time to time and so on, these things don't matter. You have the PR disaster happening and claiming that this thing happens only 0.01% of the time, blah, blah, it's relevant. You have lost credibility, you have lost reputation, and so on. So we said, can we use humans to find these things proactively? So for that, we built a system that we call it Beat the Machine. The Beat the Machine works as follows. We have a black box that is a classifier. The classifier gets us input a URL and outputs a category. So we ask people, do the following. Go out on the web and find a URL that the classifier will say that it doesn't contain any hate speech, for example, while a human, a trusted human that looks at that says this is a hate speech. So effectively beat the machine. And the incentive structure is you get $1 if you submit something that caused the classifier to fail, and you get something like 0.1 cent if we are correct. You get paid something, but your incentive is clearly on the side of trying to beat the machine. So if you want to see the conceptual equivalent, people that are doing, for example, network security, people get paid in order to break into the system. If they don't break the system, they don't get paid. So similarly, we have this thing, but for an automated system. We ask people to beta test the classifier, break the classifier. That's the idea. You get paid when you break the system. Sorry? If they get paid, they.
Hacking the system, like I know I did it, I hacked it, but you know what?
We give the answer from the classifier immediately. So.
They would trust you're actually letting the machine do that as opposed to you're just.
Yeah, we give it immediately the answer. So yes, in principle they could say that you are fooling me. You are always saying that there is no hate speech in here, saying you don't pay me. But since we pay, I think this is what establishes trust, that they start getting paid when they break the system, as opposed to getting always, oh, my classifier is good, thank you.
So something about these classifiers in general is that they make they have confidence, but there is some decision that they make. And there are lots of pages on the web that there is subjectivity to this, and there are gray areas. And I'm not certain that a classifier is really going to be is the right model for that kind of ambiguity.
Well, in order to train a classifier, you need to agree at some point that I have a region, a conceptual region in the space that I classify as PG-13. The world might disagree with me, but as a classifier, I get trained with fixed labels, right? So the classifier itself gets trained like that. So humans might disagree with the classifier, but
so the burden's now on us to interpret the classifier.
Yes. But also don't forget that people are going to be compared also with the answer that the other human will give. So you have a set of trusted humans that are playing with you on the system. So, and actually we started doing that and we said, okay, let's see how good are people in doing that. And for example, for our hate speech model, they submit 1,000 URLs. 16% of the time they found a mistake. They managed to break the classifier. For illegal drug use, about 5%. For alcohol abuse, 30% of the time they were managing to break the classifier. So James, that was answering your question. They start getting paid from these things. So they start trusting that this is a real system. And for adult, also approximately 15 to 20%. This error rate, this success rate, was something like 10 to 100 times higher than what we were expecting the classifier to fail in random traffic. And however, we started using the system, then we realized the following. Once people find a mistake, they don't stop there. For example, they figured out that we are really bad at multilingual. So they submit to one multilingual page, the classifier looks at the text as, oh, no term that I recognize, therefore It belongs to the majority class, which is nothing offensive. And of course, people started afterwards probing in that one. So we started getting Japanese porn, Chinese porn, German porn, Finnish porn, German hate speech, and so on. At this point, though, these failures were not unknown unknowns. They were known unknowns. I know that I suck with that. I know that I suck at multilingual, so I don't need anything like that anymore. So for that, we actually, and it was not trivial to fix the classifier on the fly to handle this content. Actually, takes a long effort. However, what we could do a second layer model that was detecting, is this probe similar to any other successful probes that I received in the past? Therefore, and after some point, we're saying, okay, after people submit enough multilingual stuff, we say, okay, I start recognizing that this thing with German words tends to be a successful probe. So that when people submit something that we predict that is going to be successful, we say, thank you, but this is a known unknown. So you are not going to get paid the same amount as before. And actually, the structure now is $1 if you submit us an unknown unknown. We fail while we are confident that we are correct, and we don't know about that. That is $1. The reward drops if we say, here's a probe. Oh, but we say we already know about that. The model fails with confidence, but we already know about this area. Therefore, your payment is lower, and the lowest amount of payment is when people submit URLs that the classifier already says, I don't know what to do with that. I'm very uncertain about the outcome. It can contain hate speech or not. So that was the machine structure. And actually, we started using this structure for a variety of systems, not only for the machine. We are effectively paying people to interact with our systems and different algorithms to figure out ways that we fail and we give unpredictable and bad outcomes. Now, final part. So far, I have described cases where I evaluate people. I tell them how good they are in terms of quality. I pay them when they are successful and so on. I would decide how much to pay them and so on. The problem is that people don't like to be evaluated. Nobody likes to have a score associated with their performance. Students don't like to get midterm grades. Workers don't like to be evaluated. Everyone wants to feel that they are great. And when they don't, actually, their reactions can be surprising, to use the moderate term. So, for example, one guy on Mechanical Turk realized that his score dropped. He started writing me a long email. His score dropped from something like 100% to 90-something%. You beep, beep, beep. I know what you are trying to do. You are trying to reject my work. You are trying to artificially lower my score so that you have an excuse not to pay me. I know you're kind. You requesters with your automated systems. I don't know how many times this guy has been burned in the past. And he was actually pretty good. And then this was this Odessa guy that had a similar drop in his score. And he started saying, oh, please don't fire me. Please don't fire me. I really like my job. I really like what I'm doing. Tell me what I'm supposed to do in order to improve my performance. I will do the best to give you the best work that you want, boss. I will do everything, and so on. Again, he was pretty good. So a couple of years back, I was in a conference by National Academy of Sciences that they called Frontiers of Science. The setting is that they get people from a wide variety of disciplines: physicists, biologists, economists, climate change people, computer scientists. They say, talk. Just present your work and something might happen. So I'm presenting this work about quality on crowdsourcing. And I have Don Cooper, who is a biologist, cognitive psychologist, neurobiologist in University of Colorado. I say, yes, your workers behave like my mice. And I say, please go on. Your workers, what they want to do is they want to use their motor skills and they don't want to use their cognition, their cognitive skills. So here's what he means. The brain, despite the fact that it is a pretty small organ, it's about 3 pounds, it consumes a tremendous amount of energy. It consumes 20% of your daily energy needs. Therefore, biologically speaking, the brain tries to delegate many of the tasks to other less energy hungry parts of the body. So for example, when you're walking, your brain doesn't get directly involved. It has delegated this thing to the autonomous nervous system. Your brain will get involved only when you stumble on something, or if you press a gum and your leg gets stuck in something. So I look at that and say, so what your workers are trying to do is they are trying to delegate cognition to motor skills. They just want to go click, 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 and get paid. They don't want to think about it. I say, yeah, that's a biological tendency. I say, that's good connection, makes sense. Thank you. That's a nice connection to remember. Not done. Okay, here's what I'm doing to train my mice to behave. To use their cognitive skills and not their motor skills. Here's the experiment. So mice, the reward is food. Right? They like to eat. So it has this 2 setting now, where mice have to set 2 ways to find food. One is they go to a bucket that has pellets. They press a lever, a pellet drops, they eat. They're happy. There are other, these motor skills, right? Just you press, food, you eat. The other approach is there is a maze. They need to solve the maze to find the food and eat. This requires cognition. Of course, if you leave it to their own devices, the mice just press the lever, they get the food, they don't even get into the maze. How can you make the mice to use the maze? Basic idea is you confuse the motor skill and you reward cognition. What does it mean to reward confused motor skills? Here, instead of giving the food directly when they press the lever, you make it probabilistic. Sometimes you give them food, sometimes you don't. So mice, now this thing stops being a mechanical action, right? They drop this thing. Where's my food? So they get, you know what, I might as well solve the maze where I know where the food is. So extending this idea, you can try to play the same games with humans online. So, for example, when I detect that the quality of the submission is dropping, instead of telling people you're bad, you start giving them implicit feedback by frustrating them. So, for example, when they are about to label an image, the image is ready, but we start introducing artificial delay. Please wait, image loading, image loading, image loading, image loading, and here it is. So, or image didn't load, please come back again. Or 404 error, reject the hit and come back again, and so on. So, and again, you should make this probabilistic. If you make it deterministic, here is the wrong answer. And you get these delays, people figure out that something is wrong. But if you make it probabilistic, it starts working. And you have the opposite side where you are trying to reward cognition. Cognition likes to see variety. So they like to see new things. And so on. You should not make the task boring. So we try to play with that. Interestingly enough, so when I was at MIT last year, they told me, oh, there is a plugin for that. And here is a Drupal plugin that is called Misery. That if you have a website that has users and you have trolls that you want to get rid of, if you block their account, they will come back. They will open a new one. But with this Misery, you can say, oh, this IP address or this account will start getting the following treatments. So for example, 40% of the time, you introduce a random delay in serving a page. Or 10% of the time, give them a white screen. or a wrong page, or a random page, or a 403 error, or a 404 error. And of course, you make their experience with the site miserable. So if you want to drive someone out, instead of telling them you are banned, you cannot enter the club, you just make the club really suck for them. And this is called slow banning. The other strategy, it's connected to that, is called hell banning, where you mark people as undesirable, you send them to different rings of hell, and there they can see only other people that have the same property. So for example, you might have two trolls fighting each other, you suck, no, you suck, you suck, you suck. And nobody else in the site can see their fight. So they fight in the comments, everything seems normal, but they are the, nobody else can see them. That's hell banning. So we started playing with this idea of slow banning, and we tried all sorts of tasks like web page classification, tagging images, collect URLs. And indeed, we realized that instead of getting 60% wrong, spammy submissions, so what happens is that if you leave your tasks, in quotes, unprotected, spammers come, since they have no cost in submitting crappy work, they submit a lot of work. So typically 60% of the work that you will get back will be completely crappy. It will come from a few users, but it will be crappy. And we realized that the quality of the answers improved significantly. Instead of getting 100+ submissions from spammers, we're getting less than 5. Their quality, they couldn't submit much actually because they were getting all these delays. And we're getting less than 3% bad submissions. The good workers actually, they were mostly unaffected. So they kept working, but we noticed the following, that we're getting slightly longer response times. And there was another interesting result. I came back, I was discussing this result with the biologists. They said, do you see conversions? I said, what's a conversion? Well, bad workers start behaving well. I said, this thing should not happen, right? I mean, a spammer is a spammer. He says, no. There should be some people in the border that realize that it makes sense for them to start doing good work. And it did actually, I was stunned by that. Approximately 15% of the spammers started submitting good work, which I found extremely surprising because I couldn't understand why. And the other very surprising thing was that why the good workers were unaffected, were affected. Why did they start being slower? I was not treating them with delays. I was not interfering with their tasks. So why they start being slower? Actually, I was rewarding their cognition. I was giving them novelty. I was giving them faster interaction. So why did they start being slower? That didn't make much sense. Actually, I was sitting on this thing for quite a while because I didn't know what to do with that. Until I read this book. This is a book by a Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman, in the field of behavioral economics. And he's in the intersection of psychology and economics. And he says that this theory actually of motor skills and cognitive skill can be transformed a little bit. So he says in the psychology, in the brain, we have two systems. We have system 1 that takes care of the simple things that we do, and system 2 that takes care of the intelligent action. So here's, for example, system 1, you look at two objects and you figure out one that is longer, further away than the other. This is a difficult task, right? People that do computer vision know that very well. Or figure out where from a sound is coming, or if I ask 2 and 2, how much you get 4 quickly, and so on. These are things that your brain does very easily and almost automatically. And it has this thing that says, find a strong move in chess. So that's not a system 1 thing. Unless you are a chess master. If you are a chess master, you have internalized the skill so much that you don't think about it. You just play intuitively. You look at the board and you say, oh, that's a good move. I don't know why, but it's a good move. So it becomes system 1 task for the chess masters, which actually started giving a hint what was going on. System 2 tasks, by the way, are things like focus attention on clones in a circus or find someone in the crowd and so on. So what was happening? We had people doing these boring, monotonous tasks of labeling web pages. But they were good at that. They were getting in the zone of effectively submitting things and dealing with the content very quickly. They didn't need to think about that. It was monotonous, but they could handle monotonous work. This actually that most academics find very unfamiliar, that there are people that like monotonous cognitive work. My assistant actually says that she really likes extremely boring, predictable work. She doesn't like when I bring new things to her to deal with. But what we're doing by introducing these novelty treatments and to wake them up, to give them something more interesting, we're getting them out of that system one processing. People were processing things in system one with our novelty, we're pushing them to use their system two, the most slow, the more expensive part. So therefore now we have a system that says, if people are fast and they deal with monotonous work and they do good work, leave them there. They are in system one processing and they are doing well. If they don't, start giving them some treatments, delay the page, introduce some annoyance. This brings them back into system two, into the intelligent part. And of course, if they keep not performing well, you can slow ban and kick them out of the system. And people that are here, give them some boring things to do and see if they can handle that without problems in quality. If they are system one processors, they are great. Don't touch them. They are really good at what they are doing. And this actually gives a nice balance into the system. I will stop here. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Like the mice problem with the maze and the hitting the thing. When you're hitting the thing and you're getting a reward, it's like it reminds me of the slot machines in gambling. So why do people like the slot machine so much? And why is it the case that some of those mice are that some people just want to just hit that thing repetitively, even with the probabilistic rewards?
I haven't thought of that.
Let me ask the question differently, because I'm old, right? I remember some results from about 100 years ago, close to that B.F. Skinner did on rats. And he had them pushing a lever, and there's a whole study we call schedules of reinforcement. And his conclusion was random variable reinforcement caused more behavior than predictable reinforcement.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if he's doing it, it's the experiment this guy is doing are a different kind of rats, or the conditions are different enough, but at least what I've always said, and this is why slot machines work, if you don't know for sure if it's going to work, you keep trying.
So in the Skinner case, the random rewards in the modern era is email. People check their email frequently because every now and then the slot machine pays out, but most of the time it doesn't. And I think the difference here is that, so in a classic random reward study, you take a scheduled reward, 1 pellet for each pull, and you vary it. But so the average remains 1 pellet per pull, but sometimes you get 5 and sometimes you get 0. And my hunch would be that your mouse friend was reducing the rewards level, but using random rewards to camouflage the fact that it was being reduced. So the reduced behavior is because you've in fact reduced the rewards level.
So you're saying because
people you're not just adding perturbations, you're actually reducing the overall payout.
So first it's 1 pellet per.
Yeah, the average payout is reduced.
And now it's 1 every 5.
Yeah.
Which is what you're doing with what you were talking about with the website is the more people do bad, the less reward they get. So that would make sense with this kind of.
That's true. Okay.
So related to the refund idea that you had, wherein you get paid back your bonus from previous. Is there a sense of frustration because the amount of reward that you would get keeps reducing as you increase in quality, right?
For that, for the refund?
Yeah, because
no, your average payment increases, plus you get the refund.
Well, your average payment increases, but your bonus reduces.
Yeah, but it's let me go to that slide. So at the end, your bonus plus your payment remains the same.
No, that's fine. So if I'm a worker and I started out at 60% accurate, and then I got 70% accurate, let's say I would think that the bonus that I get is larger than the bonus I would get when I move from 70 to 80%.
Yeah, but your payment also increases. Your salary increases as well. Your bonus decreases, but your salary increases.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's something like you're a banker, right? You start with 90K per year plus bonus. If you're doing really well in your first few years, you get a big bonus. Your salary remains small. As you proceed, your salary starts getting really high. Your bonus might get comparatively lower, but the total remains the same.
Right. So my question is, does changing the reward structure from fixed plus bonus to a larger fixed and a smaller bonus, how does it affect motivation?
I have. So because the bonus in that case introduces uncertainty as well, as opposed to the certainty of the. It reduces participation because
It reduces
participation.
The bonus reduces participation.
No. The lower fixed payment reduces participation because many people don't want to rely on bonuses to get paid. They prefer the certainty of the fixed price, the guaranteed payment. Because I say now, you know what? Here's your payment. Get 20 cents. Plus, I detect that if you continue, you might have a bonus payment of 30 cents. And if you compare the two, some people will continue try to get the bonus that you promised them. But if you promise 50 cents immediately, typically you capture a higher percentage of the market.
So I'm just curious if this is something worth trying, that people are in general loss averse. So
we didn't try to take money out of people. We cannot implement it easily.
Oh, no. So instead of saying it's a bonus, you could say if you continue working at your current level for the next 20 tasks, you could make X more for the work you've already done.
It reminds me of the following study that the people did with teachers, that they gave the bonus in the beginning of the year, that here is extra $10,000 for the year if your students at the end of the year hit this amount. And we're going to take the bonus off later. Instead of saying, here's your year, at the end of the year, we're going to give you $10,000 if your students perform well. You say, here's the bonus now, take it. But if your students don't hit, we're going to hold from your salary. And that actually made a tremendous improvement in teachers' performance.
So that random punishment system that you're talking about in the end seems slightly passive-aggressive, I guess. Are you ever afraid of losing people who potentially would try to improve the quality of their work if that was made more explicit?
In the comparison of the two, we don't lose. Now, whether I'm afraid that I might lose, maybe I don't. But when I did the side-by-side, just showing the score versus introducing these treatments, the treatments work better.
So these folks who are working more slowly in System 2, do you have any sense of their subjective satisfaction with what they're doing? I mean, I could label born or not born extremely quickly. It doesn't mean that I would be happy doing it.
I have no idea about it.
So, I mean, what it suggests is maybe if people are actually in that state, maybe you should be pushing them off to something that's more difficult or keeps them engaged, makes use of the fact that they want to be engaged in that way.
Oh, you mean take them even further out of the...
Take them out of that system completely.
A different, more...
Yeah, something
I
that...
haven't thought of that, yes. That's a good suggestion.
I'm curious about the theoretical model. You have a very rich set of sort of empirical studies of what people do. And in trying to analyze that, you can take two very different points of view about the human subject. One is people are rational maximizers. And if you give them information, they'll use it. If you give them so and so on. And how do you account for what they do based on their maximization? The other is people are not rational maximizers. They're rats. They have these quirks of risk versus gain and system 1, system 2, and you can manipulate that to get them to maximize your
Actually,
but not to their benefit. Which of those do you apply?
I played, okay, initially, the key thing that I couldn't quite satisfy myself was this part: why do people convert to start doing good work when they start getting these treatments? And if you take the argument of people are rational, then they shouldn't be affected by such, subconscious treatment, right? So you cannot say, oh, you know what, I'm playing with your nervous system, or limbic system, and so on, and I affect your rational self, and you're optimizing. It just, the theory doesn't click. So I know it will sound bad, and I'm being recorded, but yes, I'm playing a little bit more the rat game.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.